On this episode, we are going to be baking apple pie. We're going to show you how to make your crust from scratch and assemble the pie for your family to enjoy hot and out of the oven. You're going to need butter, shortening, sugar, flour, cinnamon, nutmeg, sugar, and apples. You are going to use a mixing bowl, an 8 or 9 inch pie plate, measuring cups and spoons, a paring knife, saran wrap, and a trusty rolling pin. To our bowl, we have added our flour, our salt, and our shortening. I half my shortening because I like to use butter to make it flaky. So I have cut my butter into cubes and we're going to add it to the bowl. We're going to use our fingers and work in the flour and the butter until they're about pea-sized bits, which we will show you. So we're just going to take our fingers and just mush it like you would when you were a kid in the mud. Just mush it all together. Make sure you get the flour and the butter and the shortening mixed all together as you're doing this. Once we get to the pea size, we are going to add our water in. We have crumbled our shortening and butter into our flour and salt until it's a small pea size. Now you're going to take a fork and a tablespoon at a time, we're going to take cold water and drizzle it into our batter. And you're going to mix it in just like this. And it's going to form a ball. You may have to work it a little bit, but it's going to form a ball. So we're just going to take our water, our cold water. If you feel like you need to put an ice cube in your pitcher of water, that's fine too. Just make sure it's not like it's going to be ice cold, but it needs to be colder than just tap water. So that's 4 tablespoons of water. And we're just going to stir this together until it comes away from the sides of the bowl. And then you're going to have to work it a little bit more with your hands. And you can kind of press it in so that it gets all those extra bits of flour. And that's actually a really good consistency right there. Now that we've incorporated our water into the dough, basically, we're going to form it into a ball. And since we're making a 2 pie crust and not a 1, you need to cut the dough in half. You can actually just leave it in a ball like what I normally do. I don't really follow the directions. It's up to you. I just leave it in a ball in the bowl and cover the bowl with saran wrap. It actually says to put it on a floured surface, divide it into 2, and cover it in the saran wrap itself. But that's up to you, however you want to follow the directions. So we're just going to put this in our bowl, cover it with saran wrap, and refrigerate it for about 45 minutes. We have combined our flour, sugar, nutmeg, and cinnamon and just kind of stirred it together to make sure it's all combined. We are now going to take our apples and we're going to take a paring knife or a peeler, whichever you feel comfortable with, and peel the apples. So you're just going to kind of get under the skin with your knife and just continue to peel them. And I like to make a competition for myself of how long I can go before the peel breaks. I don't know why, it's just fun. You don't want to get too much of the apple, you're just getting the skin as you are pulling this off. And like I said, you can use a peeler if you feel safer with that option. But you want to make sure that you remove the peel from the apple because as it bakes, it will not taste like you want it to. And just kind of take off the bottom to make sure there's no peel there. We're going to set that aside. We're going to do the other 4 apples. We have peeled all of our apples. We've removed the peel off the bottom. We left the one on the top, that's okay. You can remove it if you want, or you can leave it there. We are going to take our chef's knife. We're going to half the apple, so cut it in half. We're gonna decore it. So we're gonna cut it in half again. Very carefully, we are going to take the knife on an angle, so not straight down and not like completely to the side. At an angle, make sure your fingers are all up on top. You can even use the palm of your hand here, but make sure your fingers are all on top. And at an angle, slice into the apple and remove the core of the apple. Now you're going to take this piece here, and with your knuckles in a rocking motion, you're going to thinly slice the apple. So you want them just a little bit bigger than paper thin. So that's about, I would say, 1/8 of an inch if you're going to measure it. And then you're just going to take your slices and drop them into your flour, cinnamon, sugar, nutmeg mixture. And we're going to do this to all of our apples. I'll show you one more time how to decore it. So at an angle, make sure all your fingers are up so that you don't slice into them at the bottom, and remove the core. And then we're just going to thinly slice again all the way through that quarter. Make sure that if you do it quick like that they all break apart so that they will evenly cook or be coated in your mixture. That one's a little tough. And then again, just throw them into your mixture. After we sliced our apples and mixed them with the cinnamon, sugar, nutmeg, flour mixture, we set everything up and put our dough, separated our dough into half and put it on a lightly floured surface. We're going to take some of that flour and flour our rolling pin, and we're going to roll out our dough into a circle. You want it kind of thin because obviously it's a pastry. It's your crust for your pie, but you want to make sure that it stays in as much as a circle as you can. This is the one part about apple pie that I have not mastered myself, but I'm going to do my best here today. The more of a circle you keep it, the easier it is to get into your pan evenly. So we're just going to roll it and roll it. And if it cracks like this over here, that's okay, because you can just kind of pull it, pinch it, press it, and it works. It's very moldable. We may need a little more flour here. If it starts sticking and picking up on the edges, just put a little more flour. And see, my circle is not very much of a circle, it's very oblong. But that's okay, because we are at-home bakers and not professional chefs. Now, once we get it to the thickness and width that we want, or that we desire, we are going to fix that crack again. Really? You're going to take it on your rolling pin, so you may want to flour it a little bit more just to make sure that grease or butteriness isn't there. So you're going to take it over your rolling pin and roll it up. Take your pie plate, and my crust just totally broke. And we're just going to roll it into the pie plate like so. Now, like I said, this is okay. We're just going to pull it this way and fix it. So you just kind of want to put it together, push it together a little bit, and just fix that seam. If you feel like you need to like completely fix it and it doesn't look great, you can get some water, wet your fingers, and it'll mold right back together. Okay. Now that we've rolled our pie dough into our pie plate and fixed our little crack, we're going to take our apple mixture, or apple sliced mixture, and pour it into the pan, the pie crust, the dough, whatever you want to call it. Just pour it in there. You're going to take your fork or spatula, whatever you're using right now, and just kind of, don't break your dough, evenly distribute it throughout the crust. Make it flat. You don't want it to be too much over the top of the edge. You kind of want it to be a little flat, So you may have to use your fingers and get in there and manipulate the apples on the edges to where it goes all the way to the side. Don't worry, it will cook down, but you don't want it too high up because then your second crust won't fit very well. So we're just going to manipulate these around, and then we're going to take pads of butter, about a half a tablespoon in thickness, and just place on top of the dough, or on top of the apples before we put the other crust on. We've put about a tablespoon of butter in little pads across the top of our apple pie. This makes sure that it stays moist while it bakes and that it is nice and creamy when you eat it after it bakes. So we're going to move this pie plate off to the side. We're going to sprinkle a little bit more flour onto our board and take our second dough, or the other half of our crust, and form it into a disc, which will kind of help us get it into that circular rolling pattern, if that makes any sense. And again, put some more flour on your rolling pin and go to town, just like we did the other one. We've rolled our second dough up onto our rolling pin, and you're just going to find a starting place over on the edge. She's crying because the pie's not done yet. She's impatient. You're just going to roll it straight off like so, roll it straight off, and there it is. Now we are going to take a butter knife. There's multiple ways you can crimp it with your fingers and do the whole little thing. The easiest way that I have found to do this is to just take your butter knife, hold your dough on the edge of the pie plate, find the edge with your knife, and just slice around. And you're cutting both pieces of dough while you're doing this because they're there together. So you're just going to cut around the whole pie plate. Now that we have cut off the crust, or the excess crust of the plate, you're going to take a fork. If you want them close together or further apart, depending on the size of the fork. I have a small fork, so they're going to be closer together. You're just going to take your fork on the edge of the crust and lightly press down, so you're sealing both of the pieces of crust together and giving it that decorative look. And you're just going to continue around the side of the pie, gently pressing. Don't press too hard because you don't want it to stick to the side of the, you don't want to press it into the glass, and you don't want it to break as well. So you're just very gently but strongly pressing down to give it that the imprint and to seal the sides of the dough together. We have crimped the edges of our pie, which look spectacular to me. We're going to take that butter knife that we cut off the edges, and we're going to cut 4 slits into our pie. So you can kind of just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be like perfect, but you want them across from each other. So you're just going to cut 1 slit, and 2 slits, and 3 slits, and 4, and this is totally not in the center of my pie, but that's okay. This is to vent the pie so that it doesn't, to vent the insides, the moisture that comes out, so it doesn't completely ruin your crust, and that it doesn't bubble over out of the side of your pan as well. Now, before I put something around the edge, we're going to take a paintbrush or a pastry brush, a clean one. Don't use one that you've painted the walls with, but they do sell brushes like this at Home Depot, so wash it with soap and water and make it your kitchen brush. You're going to take some water and lightly brush the top of your pie. You don't want it soaking wet, you just want it coated to make it damp. They're impatient in there. They're waiting very patiently for homemade apple pie. It's Daddy's favorite. So we're just going to brush all of the surface, including the edges. Not very hard, not with a lot of water. And then we're going to take a little bit of sugar, could be like a tablespoon, half tablespoon, whatever you have. Just use your sprinkler. You can also just use your fingers, and we're just going to sprinkle a light layer. The higher you go, the further it like just spreads it everywhere to make it even. We're just going to spread a light layer of sugar over the top of our pie. If you don't have one of these silicone covers, you can cut a hole in some aluminum foil and cover it lightly, press it around the sides so that you don't burn the edges of your pie crust. We're going to put this into a 425-degree oven for 40 to 50 minutes. We've removed our apple pie from the oven after about 40 minutes of baking. We also took off the silicone ring after it cooled for a few minutes so that it's not hot to the touch. It's a little crispy on the edges, but it'll still eat with some vanilla ice cream. It got bubbly in the center, and therefore we knew it was finished because of the color on the outside and the bubbliness on the inside. It needs to cool in our wire rack for about 2 hours, and I hope you enjoy this recipe as much as my dad does because he says it's better than grandma's. Welcome to Tip Talk, where we talk tips about apple pie. If you're new to slicing apples, please feel free to buy an apple corer. So you push down on your apple and it decores the apple and puts it into slices after you peel it. But you're going to need to remember to cut or slice your apples, the pieces of apple, thinner and not the big hunks that the corer gives you. I used a silicone ring to protect my pie from burning. If you don't have one of these or don't have a chance to get to the store and you're craving apple pie, cut a piece of foil in a circle and then cut the inner circle and lay that ring over top of your pie, and it will keep the edges from burning just like that silicone piece that I have did. There are different ways to do the edges of your pie. I cut my edge and then I use the fork to crimp it. You can do what they call fluting or a different decorative piece. You can actually cut extra dough and put it on top in decorative patterns. My mother-in-law loves to use a star pattern on hers. Just whatever you prefer, make the pie yours. As long as it tastes good, it'll always look good. Thanks for joining us on Tip Talk for apple pies.